Audio.
Okay, can you hear us now? Whoever you're communicating with?
Can someone give a thumbs up somewhere?
Oh, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Karen.
Sorry, I didn't see your text.
Apologies about that.
So start at the beginning.
Yes, so should I keep going from?
Why don't we keep going? And we have a lot to get to. And I think your slides were showing, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the last point is really additional data collection would support future evaluations of the program. One of the ways to understand compliance with the noticing requirement and also to do some targeted outreach and support for landlords would be through a rental registry. Because of the administrative lift of a rental registry, that may be best pursued at a countywide level. And so one of the other potential recommendations is to support a county-led exploration of a rental registry that could provide a variety of different data, not only on compliance with the noticing requirement, but also what levels of rent increases are going out, how many rent increases above 5%, et cetera. So any questions before I move on to cause required for eviction? Or do you want to do them all at the end?
Do you have any questions on this one?
No, I have some comments on the mediation. Do we want to just take it one by one or should we wait?
Yeah, let's keep going. I do have two questions though. One is on the DA capacity. Has that been an issue at all? And I understand that people's hesitation might not be the right form, but I'm just curious, have we run into, has there been capacity issues?
As in sort of
Their ability
staffing?
to review, yes.
Oh, okay. I'm not aware of a capacity issue.
Okay. And then you were talking about continuing to gather data on this. I'm just, again, curious because there's two ways we do it. We either gather the data for longer or we grab a wider pool. So the rental registry is grabbing a wider pool, which again, having the county be a part of that is amazing. So I'm thinking that's probably more preferred than many more years of data because the numbers are so small. I feel like we wait 5 more years to have 5 more years of data. It's not going to inform. Is that the correct way to think about it?
Right. I mean, we could come back in 5 years after doing some additional efforts to improve program access and awareness and see how we're doing. But I think it definitely draws out the process.
Okay.
I do have a follow-on question. We had heard in the past, I mean, I understand there's community concern with how it's being administered through the DA and perception versus reality or whatever that is. But we also had heard previously about concern around landlord retaliation. Did that come up in any of your conversations?
Landlord retaliation has come up in a lot of community outreach around habitability concerns. I haven't heard it as much with this program specifically, but I definitely have heard that feedback overall.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Alexis. We'll keep going. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to the city's cause required for eviction policy. This was also established in 2019. It regulates the grounds for eviction with the goal of providing additional fairness and stability for households that rent. It applies to properties with 3 or more units. And it establishes allowable causes for eviction in 2 buckets: for cause evictions and no fault evictions. And I won't go through these, but I will say the landlord is required in providing a notice of eviction to the tenant to notify them which of these causes they are citing as the cause for eviction. However, the landlord is not required to submit information to the city. So one of the key takeaways from this is that the city's ordinance as written doesn't provide a lot of data related to evictions and displacement. This figure shows stages in the displacement and eviction process. And then on the right-hand side shows what entities have the data related to these stages. And you can see that the bottom half is really in the court system and with the county sheriffs. But before that, there are a lot of informal evictions that occur when tenants receive notices of termination, and often will vacate the unit before it ever reaches the court system. And so tenant legal service providers have some data that's important, but it's incomplete. And many cities and counties do collect notices of termination data at that stage to be able to better understand eviction trends and have documentation that otherwise is not captured. So the recommendation, and this dovetails with the recommendation for the mandatory mediation program, is to look at ways such as a rental registry that may support better data on eviction and displacement. The other takeaway is about a policy that kind of goes hand in hand and complements the city's cause required for eviction ordinance. So the state law limits annual rent increases to 5% plus the consumer price index change, or 10%, whichever is lower. That is in effect through January 1st, 2030. And the reason that this matters for the city's cause required for eviction ordinance and effectiveness is because if there is no cap on rent increases, then a landlord who doesn't have another allowable cause for eviction could raise the rent an exorbitant amount in order to evict a tenant for non-payment. And evicting a tenant for non-payment, we'll get into relocation assistance, but it's not a cause that results in a relocation payment. And so the state's limit, which prevents price gouging, is helpful in ensuring to prevent those arbitrary evictions. So there's no sort of immediate action on this, but staff's recommendation is to say, we recommend keeping an eye on this. Things are starting to bubble up around a possible extension on this anti-rent gouging provision.
Do you think it's possible that the state might even make it strengthen it? Because there's a lot of legislation coming out of the state
Right.
Around housing policy, which we appreciate.
Right.
So I'm curious if you've heard anything.
So in the spring, there was a bill that was proposed and it was ultimately withdrawn, but it did actually lower that allowable rent increase statewide.
So good thing to monitor. Okay. Any questions, Councilmember?
Is there a timing if somebody is being evicted? Or do we have a cap of timing like we did with mediation of X number of days?
Yes, so the noticing requirement, it varies depending on the cause. So an Ellis Act eviction, the withdrawal of the unit from the rental market is 120 days. A substantial rehabilitation would be 60 days. And then it's much shorter for for-cause evictions like non-payment of rent.
Okay. And that's standard state, that's state mandate, is that, or is that city?
So that is in the city's cause for eviction ordinance. One thing I will say is some jurisdictions have strengthened or like extended the noticing period. So the city of Larkspur actually has a 1-year noticing period for Ellis Act evictions, specifically for folks who are over the age of 62 or disabled or terminally ill.
I do like that sort of that, I think there is and that was where I was sort of going with how do we prevent situations, and especially for the older adult community. So that is an interesting option.
Right. Thank you. And then the final point for this item is the just cause for eviction policy is really important for preventing arbitrary evictions. And it's sort of one slice of a larger pie. And we know from our tenant legal service provider data and also other Bay Area cities and counties that overwhelmingly non-payment of rent is a major cause of eviction. It's the most often cited. And so, which really speaks to how the affordability challenges in the Bay Area are impacting eviction risk. And so happy that Chris is going to be talking in a little bit about some additional strategies, but a couple that we would highlight from a staff level. I mentioned that throughout the housing element community engagement, tenant workshops rooted in Marin, habitability has come up continuously as a concern. And we're really proud of our periodic housing inspection program, and also might recommend looking at ways to strengthen that program or other potential strategies for strengthening housing conditions and habitability. The other item that has come up and that we spoke about earlier this year is regulation of utility cost pass-throughs. We're seeing more and more that there's charges external from rent, not just utilities, but utilities has come up a lot in the conversation in the past year. And so exploring and gathering more data about utilities as a potential additional unexpected cost burden for families. Any questions on the just cause?
No, not many, no.
Okay, finally, our relocation assistance policy. This is a requirement in certain cases of no fault eviction for a landlord to provide a relocation payment to a tenant to help them with unexpected costs of moving and finding new housing. So the city has two relocation assistance policies based on geography. So there is a citywide policy that applies to low-income tenants in cases, specifically in cases of substantial rehabilitation. And then there is a policy that applies in the canal. There's a policy that applies in the Canal Opportunity Zone, which is 2 census tracts pictured in the map here. And this covers all cases of no fault eviction. We also, based on an urgency ordinance passed last year, have temporary relocation assistance in cases of substantial rehabilitation in the Opportunity Zone through the end of 2026. So a couple of different local policy layers. One of the key takeaways from our analysis is that tenants with similar income and household composition can receive drastically different levels of support based on where they live. So this table was in the agenda packet and shows just a sample permanent relocation assistance payment for a 2-bedroom unit. And as you can see, I won't go through the line by line, but in this case, and in many cases, a tenant, the same tenant living in the Opportunity Zone who is evicted for a no-fault cause, in this case receives upwards of $15,000. That same tenant being evicted for substantial rehab outside of the Opportunity Zone, excuse me, might receive about $7,200. Or if it's not a substantial rehab and it's a different no-fault eviction, might receive $3,600. And I use the fair market rent. So this is actually a conservative difference, because oftentimes if someone's being evicted for substantial rehab, they might not be in a unit that's at fair market rent. And I think the other final takeaway is that there's low-income tenants across the city, a lot in the Canal Opportunity Zone and also in other parts of the city that are vulnerable to displacement. As you can see, in just 2 census tracts in the Canal Opportunity Zone, there are over 1,000 renter households in 2023 who had an annual income under $75,000. Which speaks to the reason that we have the current policy in place, because it is a concentrated area. of very low income tenants. However, in San Rafael, outside of the opportunity zone, there's an estimated additional 4,300 tenants who also have annual incomes under 75,000.
With that, is there any direct cost to the city on that, or is that all directed to for the relocation, all the to the landlord or whoever, the property owner?
The city does not pay, and the city also does not, the city, when we process, will, a relocation payment through a permit will charge a small administrative fee to cover staff time. So the recommendations that follow for relocation assistance include potentially engaging stakeholders with the goal of creating a single citywide policy that applies in all cases of no fault eviction. So potentially creating more of a standardized approach across the city. And then the last point is just a note on enforcement. We are looking at implementing a new permitting system for this community development department, and the implementation of the new system is an opportunity for us to better integrate our enforcement in cases of substantial rehab into the workflow. And so that's something that we're also looking at as we proceed with the implementation of that new software. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Start with two, and I'm sure Councilmember Fritz will have some. We'll go back and forth. So on the one that you just presented, in the staff report, it talks about MTC's TOC policy. Can you speak to that? Because that didn't come up in your presentation. Just what that might be tied to in terms of future funding opportunities.
Yeah,
What are you seeing there?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the Metropolitan Transportation Commission recently came out with, they developed a transit-oriented communities policy, which actually goes across 4 different buckets. And one of them is affordable housing and commercial stabilization. And within that bucket, the tenant protections is one area. And there are a couple of standards that they've established, both for cause required for eviction and for relocation assistance. And in the future, starting in 2026, they are looking at considering how a city scores across those 4 buckets as a factor in some discretionary funding allocations. And so in looking at, staff wanted to flag that in this presentation to say, you know, we might want to look at that as well in terms of if we're going to go in and revise an opportunity to maybe make sure, see if we want to be at that standard.
Okay, and are they providing any sort of, I already know the answer, is technical assistance to cities that want to explore it, or?
They are.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so they are providing technical assistance support, and we've had a number of conversations through the countywide housing working group.
Okay.
ABAC has come and presented. Actually, they just presented at our last one a couple of weeks ago. So one of the things that we could consider doing, if the subcommittee would like, is coming back to you or whichever subcommittee is appropriate and looking at that transitory community policy overall, because this is just one piece.
If there's going to be ties to future funding dollars, I think we always want to take a look at that. I mean, really, so. And I'm glad that the county's looking at that too. I mean, that's definitely, we always tend to compete better when we have the regional projects. And then I have one more question. So the data, so the current policy that was passed is census tract specific. So I have 2 questions on that. One, do we have any data on the utilization? I mean, it's relatively new and I understand that, but do we have any data on that?
On the urgency ordinance?
On the one that you just presented, the no fault eviction in the opportunity zone. So was it utilized at all? So we.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was adopted in 2021, and there have been probably about 65 units that have been gone through specifically for substantial rehabilitation. So I'll back up and say that policy covers all no-fault evictions, but there's some no-fault evictions that don't come across this department, right? So we don't have data on removal of a unit from the rental market, but we do see permits, and that's when we track substantial rehabilitation. So when I say we've seen maybe 65 units come through that we've evaluated for payment, it's for those specific substantial rehabilitation cases.
And is the majority of the 65 from 400 Canal? Okay,
Yes.
so if we were to take that, and not to take it out, but I'm just, again, I'm trying to get a sense of the how much it's being utilized. Okay. And then the other question, it kind of goes back to something you said earlier. So City Council created this based on geography, so it was census tract based. But then you had said in answer to Councilmember Kurtz's question about can we do population demographics as a utilizer versus geography? So right now, the framing that we're using is geography. Could we use population demographics? Is that legal and allowable for? So I'm looking at this box, the table 1 on the outside of the opportunity zone, eviction for substantial rehab. There's currently in the opportunity zone, there's supplemental payment in the gray box. So I'm curious, my framing, do you understand what I'm asking? Is that possible to do it outside of the opportunity zone for the demographics of the household?
Yes, so when we're talking about, and in fact, Larkspur, their updated policy in 2023, I believe, includes a citywide supplemental payment for people over age 62, and folks who are disabled. So yes, it is something that could be implemented citywide.
And could you just do that box? Because you have different tiers you have in there. There's rent, security deposit, moving expensive, et cetera, et cetera. But would it be possible, if you do one, do you need to do them all? Or can you just have the supplemental payment?
I think that the council and staff can develop any mixture of,
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
So my follow-on is also around that supplemental payment. That is our control.
yes.
Within, okay, so that is our define. And I was also looking at, I mean, between mediation, all the tenant protections. I think one of the things that I mean, you mentioned Larkspur has for relocation assistance, and they also have it for other things as well. Right, so all of their tenant protections have a carve out around the different criteria around age and some others.
Right, they do it both for a supplemental payment for relocation assistance, and they provide a time extension for notification.
Okay. Yeah, yes, I mean, I don't know if we want to just do general comments right
Go
now,
ahead.
but I think for the work that we're doing here, I think it would be really helpful to look at a recommendation around older adults for homeless prevention. I think that is a piece that we need to, I mean, there's other segments as well, but I think those who are on fixed income, those who are older adults under 75K, I mean, it's a huge population right now. Out definitely across all of San Rafael. And I'd say even more than within the opportunity zone. It's primarily outside the opportunity zone. And so I think we do need to look at that and see if there's a recommendation that could come forward. Again, using these tenant protections, and maybe there's others that other communities are looking at as well. But I think that we need to absolutely, support that.
Great, thank you. So, well said. So I see the recommendations are on page 6 that you walked us through. So just quickly going through, yes, to the county, doing a rental registry. We know that's been talked about and I'm actually, sounds like a joke, but it's actually not. We talked about it a lot in the East San Rafael working group or East San Rafael, whatever that was, that group that we worked on during the pandemic. And so I know the county's been talking about it a lot, and the lift was so big that the capacity, and I know we all constrained, but the capacity of the county was just, it made more sense. So I that has continued to come up. So I'm really excited to see that still being put to the forefront. Supporting the state's extension. yes, I think Councilmember Kurtz and I 100% agree with that. I would be curious if there are any other bills that are coming down, so we don't unintentionally put us in a position where we are overextended, maybe what we're asking of property owners, like what we're trying to, well, you know what I've been trying to say on that, so. And then we both spoke to the strengthening enforcement and relocation assistance. I'm interested also in the supplemental payments and let me see, let me see, strengthening enforcement. Wait, so that's I'm looking at bullet point number 4. The yes on the strengthening enforcement and relocation assistance, and we're talking about that citywide, and the other one of the no fault, just parsing that out a little more, but the key part about that is engaging stakeholders. So right now we do have it defined as property owners that have 3 or more units or 4 or more units. So again, just engaging. One thing that we pride ourselves in San Rafael is we hear it from both sides, and often the folks that are active as activists in the space, we hear from them, and the property owners, we want to have them in the space. Not that we can't have those spicy conversations, those are good, but I think that's really important. So we don't blindside anyone on that one. And I think that's fascinating that Larkspur's already done it. I'd be curious about some of their data, what they've been seeing, just because it's really similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last was to including those related to habitability. I do agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the habitation. See here for that. I would love, when it comes to the council, hear a little bit more about what that is, like, what's the bar on that? If it's basic sanitary standard practices, like absolutely 100%, that should not even be something we're talking about. So I don't have a sense of that. We don't have to get into it now. And we're not talking about necessarily always updating the appliances every 3 years. Like, I'm trying to get a sense of what we mean when we say habitability. So I'd want more than that. And I know we've talked about the RUBs, the regulation of utility. That's just, it seems like that's coming up more. And I don't think we don't know enough about it. It hasn't come before the council before. Great. Anything else you want to add, council member, before we move on?
The other tenant protection that I'm thinking of is programs like Home Match. We heard a lot about that, how Mill Valley's participating. And I think the more we can, like, so many of these are reactive, and how we can do some more proactive type of tenant protection. And so I'd like to look at that. And then the process of rehabilitation, you only know of it if it comes through and it's caught. Is that right? And so I'm wondering if there's, again, another way or another, so those don't fall through, if there's a way of catching those. And so I don't know if there is even an option on doing that. But maybe you have some thoughts.
So I think that, so we have done some staff trainings to help our permit services front counter staff catch those and flag them for review. But I also think that the implementation of the new software will help us catch them. Again, that is substantial rehabilitation, and then also if there was like a condominium conversion, which we're not seeing right now because we have restrictions and our rental vacancy is low, but those come through our department, and I think we're getting better and better at catching those, reviewing them, and asking. We have a form that the landlord's required to fill out to say if they're displacing a tenant or not, and then that will trigger the payment requirement information and proof submitted to the city.
Great, thank you.
So, and I just think as an overall general statement, we're always looking at the bang for the buck, the ROI on these things. So some of the data is really small, and it's not that we wouldn't necessarily want to do that item, even if it's only a handful of people, but really being able to explain when it comes to the council, how much resources, time, energy, money of the city is going into it, and what is the return that we're getting on it. Because what we might end up doing is on some of these, letting them go so we can more focus on something else. I don't know, but I do want us to be just thoughtful about that.
Right.
Especially when the numbers are small. So fantastic. Thank you so much. Assistant City Attorney, I have a question.
Yes.
So I know we have open time for public expression at the end, any items not on the agenda, but there are folks, members of the public here. So what about giving public comment, recognizing too, we have a big agenda, like a 60-second of anyone who wants to speak. What is your recommendation?
The agenda items out of order and bring the public comment
Now,
Well, no, the public comment is for not on the agenda. There's no, on this, there's no public comment.
we can allow for public.
Just checking. Okay, being that we do have, I appreciate people being here in the middle of a Tuesday morning. And I'm gonna do this really handy timing you, but it's only 60 seconds, but you're here and 60 seconds is better than no seconds. So if any of you would like to speak, just say who you are really, you can talk really fast on the items that we just did before we move to the next item. So just identify who you are and if you're with an organization. You want to speak? Yeah, go.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Gina Gilmet with Community Action Marin. I think that the thing I wanted to just stress is just the urgency with which we know that people in our community are being impacted by this. I think we all know the issues, but that urgency, we're seeing the community transform before our eyes. People are being displaced. It's low-income people, it's people of color. And so we don't want to see that, I think, overall. And so really appreciate some of the policies that are named here and the actions. I think moving to action as soon as possible with the information that we have, but we're learning as we go. And so let's be learning while we're also putting protections in place for people, not waiting to do that where we can make those steps. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all that your organization does. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ethan Stroll, and I work in housing policy advocacy at Legal Aid of Marin. And like Gina, stressing the urgency, but I also want to just share a bit about what our office is seeing these days. Between the 2 months before, or the 2 years before the pandemic and the past 2 years, we've seen over a 50% increase in court evictions. So the point is that there is increasing displacement, and like Alexis said, this is largely because of non-payment of rent or the cost of housing for folks in San Rafael. Around 50% of the constituents in San Rafael are renters. When folks come into our office seeking legal help, our attorneys can only do so much with the current laws in place. So if a tenant comes in and didn't realize about a utility charge for $300 that's on page 55 of their lease, there's nothing our attorneys can do if the tenants didn't sign that contract and didn't anticipate this charge. Same if a tenant is evicted for no fault of their own and have to find unaffordable housing in San Rafael to avoid homelessness. There's nothing our attorneys can do when tenants face displacement and are faced with the tough housing market in San Rafael. So there's a lot we still don't know, and we need to collect more data, but it is clear based on what our office is seeing that there is an urgent issue of displacement in San Rafael, and we're looking forward to collaborating with the city to discuss these tenant protections and move towards action. So look forward to that.
Thank you, Ethan.
Hi, Carly Finkel, Senior Policy Manager at Canal Alliance. Really just want to echo the comments that have been made before, and thank you all and staff for taking the time to kind of do this point in time assessment, look back on how things are going, and just want to, again, stress the real urgency. I think the direction of moving towards citywide protections and sort of recognizing that the urgency ordinance in the opportunity zone was trying to move as quickly as possible with the tools that we had in that moment, but knowing that these challenges really extend beyond those boundaries. And also just thinking both not about how just to meet the existing housing crisis, but also really looking forward and recognizing that there's going to be new challenges in the future, and thinking about how we can prepare for some of those things with strong tenant protections before kind of those crises hit. So.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I realized that you had talked about, and I was thinking about when you guys were talking about the Spanish translation. And so I didn't see that as a recommendation, but I would think I mean, I think that needs to be a priority just in terms of accessibility.
Right, it should be.
Well, I was just looking at this last bullet point. So
Right, it's
Okay.
right, and there were 2 memos, but yes, it
Okay.
is in there, absolutely.
I'm sure it was. Okay, thank you. The next agenda item you are on, we have the Rooted in Marin Strategies for Anti-Displacement. Thank you for being here to present.
Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Chris Logan, and I am the Partnership for Bay Future Fellow. And my work is to really support the work of the Rooted in Marin report that Alexis is really integral in making sure that we had good information to produce that report. I spent a lot of my time looking at ordinances across the state, and particularly ordinances that have populations and demographics of cities that are within our county. And so there's a lot of recommendations in the report. You guys have actually implemented some of those recommendations, but I'll try to focus my comments on kind of the questions I heard, some opportunities to augment based off what I've seen in other towns and cities. So yeah, Rooted in Marin is a community-centered initiative, and it was aimed at understanding displacement. And we understand displacement as when a resident is involuntarily forced to leave their home or neighborhood due to circumstances beyond their control. It was a collaborative effort in implementing the housing element policies across the cities and towns in our county. And yeah, so housing element 2021 to 2031 cycle, the cities and towns and county conducted a needs assessment to guide the development of programs and policies. And we want to proactively foster inclusive communities, remove barriers to housing opportunities, and promote neighborhood stability for our renters. Next slide. So just a little bit about what's in San Rafael's housing element. Rent stabilization is one of them, just cause, relocation assistance, something called a tenant commission, also known as a rent board in other jurisdictions, and the right to return are some of the things that were in your housing element. You guys already have some things in place, but there's also some opportunities to even strengthen what you have, which I'll hopefully cover. So here's a little bit of the data coming from 2010. And so what we see is, and I know this is a confusing graph, but the blue line is your higher income households, 50% of the average monthly income, area median income and above. The red line represents your lower income households. And then the green line is just the average, the overall. What we see between 2010 and 2018, 2017, is that the displacement is kind of tracking in parallel fashion. And so people from higher income levels and lower income levels are kind of coming in and going out at similar, at least cadence. But what we see after 2018 is a big gap. We see people with lower income leaving, and so that's what it means was this below the zero, the county, while we see the households with higher income coming in. And so right now in 2023, the last data we have available have about 5 households of higher income coming in overall, while we have about 33 of lower income leaving, 33% leaving. And that what that means is that we have 18% displacement. Next slide. Just highlighting that. Next slide. So some other things to take into account that we're looking at the county, 64% of our workforce lives outside of Marin County. This contributes to the bridge being a 2-hour wait and my commute here. It also has impacts on climate change. We have a lot of very important businesses that are being employed by lower income households that just can't afford to live here. 42% of Marin County is also low income. And that is disproportionately represented by Black households at 75% and Latino households at 61% of those residents being considered low income. Next slide. Marin County has the 3rd highest median rental rate in the Bay Area and the states. And so we are number 3 across the entire state as far as our rental rates. 60% of our households are rent burdened, which means that they're paying more than 30% of their monthly income on rent. And as you were mentioning before, 50% of older adults have self-reported that they are financially burdened through the work of our area agency on aging. Next slide. So this was kind of alluded to before. So this is those areas in San Rafael that are vulnerable to displacement. And this was a study that was done by the UC Berkeley, and they've identified populations that were vulnerable to displacement And they have to have filed this criteria. At least 40% of the households are renters. The share of people in the people of color in that census tract is more than 50%. The share of low-income households are more than 50%. And the areas experiencing rent increases above the county median or adjacent county areas. And so in order to be shaded purple, you have to fit for those criteria. And this is what the map looks like in San Rafael. So it's much wider than the Canal neighborhood.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
On the map, I'm surprised, Contempo area was a mobile, because it's a mobile home park and it's already identified. Is that, I think it would, seems like it would meet at least a couple of, 3 of those 4.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of curious why that wouldn't, if there was an exclusion of that totally, or.
That's a great question. I can follow up with the person who did the research, Tim Thomas at UC Berkeley, and get a greater understanding. I think it has to do with more than just like a RV park or something like that, but like the entire neighborhood as a whole. But it is something that we should keep eyes
It's
on.
over 400. It's a huge,
Yeah.
huge area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out though.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. So some of the key takeaways is that Marin is facing a loss of economic opportunity and increasing inequality. We need diverse housing and transportation solutions for all people to live and thrive here. And we want to implement policies that are outlined in the housing elements to address the disparities that exist within the county. And so moving on to the next slide, we did some community engagement and we got a chance to speak to quite a few people in the community. At first, our first line of engagement was our advisory committee that was made up of landlords, property owners, of real estate investors, as well as the advocates, attorneys, people from the Fair Housing Network. We also did focus groups around the county. We did a community workshop that was held online, and we did a survey with 895 participants. We had 84 Spanish speakers within that who filled that survey out as well. So we were really trying to get a good understanding of what people are facing in our county. Also after the report was put out, so that was while the report was being written, after the report was put out, we also did some outreach at West Marin Community Services, at the Senior Center, at North Marin Community Services, and at Canal Alliance, as well as on Zoom. So we did was we took these results that I'm sharing with you to the community to get their sense of what is the most important thing that they would like us to see working on. Next slide. And so this is what we found out. Now, again, we would anticipate that rent stabilization would be the biggest piece of the pie. So that's what most people responded as a high need in their area. But I would also say that the two that kind of caught us off guard were really the living conditions, and that's been talked about before, as well as the need for legal support. And we know that legal aid is at capacity, and there's some recommendations that we have around supporting tenants and really being able to support themselves in the court if there's an eviction. Next slide.
And what is tenant opportunity to?
Yeah, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. That's great. Are you familiar with that, COPA and TOPA? So basically, we have a few community land trusts. We also have Canal Alliance, which is also buying property.
Right.
In order to buy that property, a nonprofit has to assemble the funds so they can put a bid on that property. Oftentimes, a for-profit entity has way more cash on hand to do that quickly, but the nonprofit needs a little bit more time. And so what the COPA and TOPA do is they give a little bit of a buffer period for nonprofits to be able to get those funds so they can have an opportunity to purchase it, to compete in that market, as opposed to kind of everyone kind of jumping at the bit once it gets on the market.
And sorry to be a broken record on
Yeah.
this, but on the data that you collected of the 895, I think, respondents, do you have a segment of older adults over 60 or over 65?
I do. I don't have that data with me on hand, but I can send it to you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, I have a question on the code, but I know that Marin County had looked quite deep at that, and so I didn't know where they netted out. We also did, but again, the ROI bang for the buck was so small. In fact, I know even the San Francisco Foundation that did create a COPA, they put lots of money, lots of people, and they had less than a dozen, I think, less than 6 that did it. So I'm curious if Marin County, do you know if they're still on the table? Alexis might know if that's still on the table.
Yeah, I know that right now we're investing in the countywide community land trust to really support our local community land trust with technical assistance. So I think what and probably Jillian can speak more to this, is to really lay the infrastructure and technical assistance so our COTs can be really viable, so that if we were to go into a COPA and TOPA
No, that makes
policy,
sense.
Yeah.
Kind of like, again, the bang, no, that's a good first step. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So these are the policy options. I want to kind of graze over some of the ones that you guys have already implemented, but also highlight based off of our discussion earlier. So interjurisdictional rental registry, the one that's most popular. And so members of the housing working group over time have been talking about the desire for a rental registry. We know we can share resources. We can have effective code enforcement with rental registries. We can track rents across our region, so we have data to make decisions on policy. And we also have access to data on the housing conditions, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms in a unit. The RENA looks mostly at only at the income level, but if we want to plan to see how many families can stay in our cities, we want to put a focus on that. That's stuff you can collect with a rental registry. The other thing I would say is that one of the things that we learned from the pandemic is that we did not have access or communication with one of our essential services, which was housing. Housing providers, we had a hard time connecting with them so they could know that there was rental assistance available for people so they didn't have to go through the eviction process. We also know in another jurisdiction in Marin County, they really needed to address some code enforcement issues on this building. And that process was delayed because they did not have up-to-date information from the property owner. And so I really think that the rental registry also serves as an opportunity for connection around if there's natural disasters or if something just comes up, we want to be able to know who to be in contact as a city entity, because in a real sense, the city is mandated to enforce a lot of things to support the community, and that will be helpful.
So we've talked about this as Mayor had mentioned for years, right? It has come up in every single report. It's come up in every conversation, the rental registry. Are we at the point now that, it seems like it could be a phased in process. We could, obviously, there's many aspects of the rental registry, but I think just starting it, are we anywhere close in terms of that?
Yeah, the great question. So we have been talking for the past 6 to 8 months with a vendor, Ptolemy, and they provided rental registries across the United States. And they're also highly regarded as being very user-friendly. And so we've been advancing those conversations. We actually just had a conversation with the housing working group to get interest of people who would like to start a pilot. And so we're looking at having 3 to 4 jurisdictions to just begin the process. We know that implementation is just so crucial, and so we don't want to overwhelm the system with 10 jurisdictions at the same time. And so we are looking at jurisdictions who would like to be part of that pilot. And there is funding available at the county level to support this, at least within the initial year. And there will probably be some financial needs from the different jurisdictions that want to be part of it, but we're trying to augment that with what's available at the county.
That's great. That's great news.
Next slide. So again, living conditions, so there is, I believe that we talked about inspection, there is the proactive code enforcement, where the inspections and the enforcement of code, and so they kind of go hand in hand. I think right now what inspections are geared towards just to inform, but it's not really that enforcement arm. And it does not rely on the tenant's comfort in making a complaint. One thing I would note about this, and you talked about retaliation earlier, Novato is currently looking at a just cause ordinance where they include anti-harassment and anti-retaliation measures within it. Because we have seen across the county, in my time here, where landlords will use their ability as a landlord to intimidate
Yeah,
and threaten.
we've heard of it, yeah.
And that really keeps people from making those complaints. And I think that that's an opportunity that we have. Alexis mentioned this too around the habitability plans. And so that's just when a tenant needs to be displaced. You know, there could be some kind of communication with the jurisdiction about that. That can also be done through a rental registry. One thing I will note that the more workflows that they call on the rental registry, the more expensive it gets. And so, you know, so we were thinking about starting off small, as you were saying, and then building upon it. But that is an option that we have as well. Next slide. So relocation census assistance you guys already have. You've already had a conversation about what they call qualified tenants. And so those are your seniors. Another demographic to consider are really stabilizing homes for children. So we're not disrupting their time during the school year. That was something that Novato had to put a focus on when they were trying to support the tenants in one situation out there. Right to return, I think that this is actually really important to bring into the conversation. So after a unit has been substantially renovated, how do we keep our communities looking the same and not turning over to something different? And that's really giving the right to return. It gives that tenant the first right of refusal whenever that housing comes back on the market. I think it gives them about 30 days to either accept or reject that. It might be smaller than that. But again, it's really to help stabilize the character of our communities, keep them diverse, and allow more people to stay here, even if there's a renovation that's needed.
Does that right to return have a qualification of at the same rent?
Yes. And that's what we're looking at in Novato is at the same rent plus the allowable rent increases at the state level. So every year, you know, you have a little rent increase, but yeah.
Yes. Okay, good.
Slide. So rent stabilization or rent control limits how much landlords can increase their rents annually. Alexis mentioned was available at the state, the 5% plus the CPI. And you know, it is something on your housing, in your housing element. And so we'll be happy to support and looking at some different options here as well. And this is the legal support. So we already have in San Rafael and in the county the dispute resolution, the non-binding process. Something that other jurisdictions have looked at is right to counsel. And so this is actually giving the tenant the right to an attorney whenever they're going into a court case regarding eviction. And think of it kind of like having a public defender in like a criminal case. And it really gives them an opportunity to have full scope representation, have access to information, to have somebody look through their documents. One thing I did not mention that I want to mention about just cause, you guys mentioned the Spanish requirement. That's often found in the just cause ordinance, where you can have that requirement done both in English and Spanish, or even make it, make it variable to whatever the tenant's heart language is that you're doing business with. The other thing I'll just say about right to counsel that we built in that last slide is this does require a significant amount of funding. We not only just want to give them the right, but we want to make sure that we have attorneys available who can do that. And so that's the other opportunity that we should keep in mind when we think about right to counsel.
Are there Bay Area jurisdictions that are using that right now?
Yes, and so I know San Francisco is the biggest one that we know. I also know that Los Angeles, which is not the Bay Area, but Los Angeles has it in place. San Jose, before I left from working out there, they were exploring the option as well. So it is something that is picking up steam. I think it is one of the biggest factors in keeping people housed is having access to legal information.
Do you think, and I was thinking the same thing as Councilmember, because as soon as you say that a lot of resources, because again, it's not that we're not willing to do that, but it means resources are going there they're not going somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so have you seen any model, or do you think it might come down that there is a regional pool of lawyers that people can access? I mean, with teleconferencing, there might be an accessibility. It doesn't have to necessarily, I guess you don't necessarily have to be tied to the jurisdiction. Have you even seen that? Do you see it going that way? Or do you think it's too new and the need is too great that it's still geographic? Only San Jose people use San Jose lawyers.
Yeah, I'm mostly seeing the geographic lawyers. The one thing that we did put into the just cause ordinance for Novato is triple damages plus reasonable attorney's fees as a remedy. And our hope is that we'll attract attorneys from the private bar to help support those cases if they know that they're going to get compensated as a result of being, and Novato is particularly interested in lowering their administrative burden because they don't have as many staff. And so that's one of the things. So I think putting out, again, more carrots, and again, you can work that into your just cause ordinance, any other ordinance or the remedy that could attract more attorneys.
Thank you.
Yeah, next slide. So our next steps, continue to consider the policies in your housing element, identify any additional policies not listed for consideration. Again, I'm here to really support the different jurisdictions and knowing and technical assistance. I'm connected with a lot of lawyers who have done tenant protections across the state of California. So really helping to write and vet those ordinances and also to do the community outreach. And so please use me as a resource to help develop and the plan and to educate the community on what's coming up.
Thank you. Great presentation. How fortunate we are to have you and your expertise here.
Yeah.
I'll turn to Alexis because with the last slide, right? But the next step, no, it's fine. I can remember because last night we had our work plan for year one and we have our 3-year goals and objectives. So of the presentation that we just had, my sense is it aligns quite strongly with what you just said, but could you confirm that or say that there are additional ones? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's D32 is the objective that says.
Yeah. In general.
That says that we will look at additional policies and evaluate them, their viability and consider implementation.
Fantastic. Do you have any questions, comments before I go to
I'd
public
like-
comment?
Sure,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a little bit more about the home match type of model, because we are hearing that there's quite a bit of success with that across not only within Marin, but also across the Bay Area. And if that is considered one of your strategies at this point within Rooted in Marin.
Yeah, that's more on the housing, what do we call that? Housing stock, increasing the housing stock side, which is not my area of expertise. I know that Jillian, you've been working with Home Match. I don't know if you want to speak to,
Well, I'm Jillian Zeiger. I'm principal planner with the county, and I run the housing working group and supervise Chris and manage the Rooted in Marin process. We've heard mixed reviews with Home Match. I really encourage you to do your research as it relates to fair housing, et cetera. I don't want to make any statements about it, but I think that it is part of the process. If you would have to invest resources. And when we think about investing resources, there are some other programs here that might be more cost effective. Just thinking about placing tenants in homes versus keeping tenants in their homes and how much that could cost per person with something like right to counsel or beefing up a just cause for eviction ordinance versus placing tenants in homes. We are going to talk about it at the Housing Working Group at our November meeting because some jurisdictions are interested and want to hear from Mill Valley. We have used CDBG funds, I think, when you're on the priority setting committee, and we have used countywide CDBG funds for Home Match in the past.
So, absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you.
I just had one question before we go to public comment, and then I want to hear your comments too. On Section 8, just kind of the role of that, and to me, there's obviously an intersection there because that provides funding and subsidies. But I noticed it didn't come out, maybe it just didn't come out in your presentation, but how do you see the role of that, which is of course federally funded, and I think there's Section 8 state vouchers too, but how is that intersecting? Just again, looking at resources and where the funding is.
Absolutely. I mean, again, this is probably something that.
Oh, sorry.
I've been very narrow focused on mine.
Okay.
But
Yeah, well, right now, it's really uncertain with the
Yeah.
federal government. We haven't, a lot of the reasons why we have gaps in our affordable housing project funding and like making projects pencil out and getting them built is that they're reliant on vouchers, and we don't have any vouchers with the housing authority right now. So it's very uncertain, something we can't rely on. You know, on the other hand, we have protections for those who are Section 8. We have source of income ordinance at local and state level, which is great. But yeah, at this time, we just don't know when we're going to get our next set of Section 8 vouchers.
Okay. Comments before I go to public comment?
Nope.
Okay. Public comment on this item. We'll keep it tight because we have one more agenda item, but you are here and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'll just speak to you again. Jean Nichol met with Community Action Marin. So Chris mentioned the pushed out briefings that we did earlier this year, 5 across the county. So I can send a follow-up write-up of that to the city council members just to share the results of that. But again, there was significant interest in habitability in particular, in the rent stabilization. And so those are issues that, again, in terms of the urgency that came from those forums, of that these are issues that are impacting people now, and there are things that we can do that were spoken to. So I'll share that as follow-up, but.
Yeah, just send it to Alexis and then she can get it to us. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'll say, Carly, again with Canal Alliance. Yeah, mostly just general comments of support in a lot of the outreach that our team has been doing with tenants as well. Habitability is a huge issue that comes up a lot, and a lot of fears of retaliation that prevent people from raising those concerns. But in sort of speaking to what are the most common habitability issues, definitely like mold and cockroaches and pests come up a lot, as well as like issues in common areas like exposed wires, construction ongoing, stairs and elevators being closed. So a lot of the habitability concerns that our team hears about when we go out are like pretty core basic health and safety issues that come up a ton. So
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, Ethan.
Yeah, just one adding on to what you inspired me. But I think what we're talking about in Nevada around the just cause ordinance is if you're a tenant and you have these conditions in your home, and then you decide to advocate to your landlord or request an inspection from the city code enforcement department, what retaliation could look like is just for your landlord to renovate that and do substantial renovations, which in most of San Rafael, outside of the opportunity zone, is a just cause for eviction. So if I'm thinking about whether I want to ask my landlord for repairs, I'm thinking about the risk of displacement. So I just wanted to highlight that particular point as an aspect of habitability in San Rafael. And that's what we're looking to make better, to have the right to return if your landlord does do those renovations, whether it's a city mandated renovation or the landlord decides to do it on their own.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I think one comment I would have and to as a going, take back and hopefully bring back is, I mean, there's so much on our plate in terms of the tenant protections. I would love to think about how do we do all of them, but if we have to prioritize, what would that look like? And what would you use to prioritize the criteria?
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate all the work that you've done and bringing all the different jurisdictions. We always appreciate the countywide regional approach. Often San Rafael and Novato, we end up leading everybody else, which is great. And I think there is, when it's synchronized across the entire county, it just makes the whole thing stronger, more sustainable. All right. Okay. So moving right along, we have the last item, which is the ERF3, Encampment Resolution Fund 3, Homelessness and Sanctioned Camping Area Update. I think I'm turning to you, Daniel.
Yes,
Right?
indeed.
Okay.
Okay, great. And I will try and keep this short so we can land this plane on time, as someone likes to say. All right, so yes, I am here to give an update on our homelessness response throughout the city. Currently, we have 50 folks residing at our sanctioned camping area. Currently, we have space for 54 individuals. We do have some tents that need to be repaired and replaced, so that's why there's a little gap. Since 2023, when Mahone Path was occupied by encampments all throughout, 24% of that population has been housed.
Wow.
In the last year, since we're now at 1 year of our sanctioned camping area being open, we've had 12% being housed. And as folks mentioned here, that's with a very large voucher shortage. So we feel good about that. We have 74% of folks actively on a housing pathway, working with case management. 100% people are connected to case management, which is exciting and took a while to get off the ground. Since the site is opened, 54% have increased their income and 82% are enrolled in Medi-Cal, CalFresh, or other similar benefits. I want to give a quick shout out to our digital team who just revamped the homelessness page. And I know they're working on other city pages, but we now have these graphics and pie charts on our webpage with like a whole refresh. So folks can see that on our webpage at any time. We held a resource fair at the end of September on the sanctioned camp, which had, I believe, 22 people attended. We had medical, dental, case management. And so those are a really great thing that we bring to the site. Also, in terms of fairs, we had the Seeds of Hope brought over 400 people to the last event. And it continues to be a great benefit for the community. And I believe the next event is scheduled for November 17th, which we'll put the flyer on our webpage and push that out through all of our city city website email blast. Thank you, channels. So that's it for the sanctioned site. It's going well. We just hit 1 year again, so we're very excited, feel very stable in terms of that coordination and the service delivery. In terms of service delivery, I did want to acknowledge Downtown Streets, which has been in Marin and San Rafael for a very long time. This is their last month of operation after 20 years in this business. Their closure will certainly affect our street level beautification, debris removal, and case management and outreach staffing across the county, leaving a gap for other providers to fill. There are a significant number of unsheltered folks across the county who are being case managed by Downtown Streets team. And so we're working with the county to try and mitigate any effects of that. Obviously, when you've been working with one case manager for a long time, switching to a new one is detrimental. So we do want to acknowledge that during the work, as well as just highlight the partnership Downtown Streets has had with this city, as well as many other cities across the Bay Area. So that's my quick update. I will go into a little Marydale outreach. Obviously, folks now have heard we are planning to launch a cabin community at 350 Marydale early next year. So staff was out in the neighborhood, just to clear up, staff was out in the neighborhood early last week and the week prior. We spoke with 25 businesses, which is every business in that direct area. We also spoke with or dropped flyers at over 240 houses. We were a little setback with the rain and weather and just not having a ton of bodies out there, but we wanted to make sure we did get out there. We certainly acknowledge we did not talk to every person, every block. It was windy, flyers flew away, people weren't home at all times, but we did try and do our best to do that and get out there. As was mentioned at the city council meeting last night, we are having our first virtual community meeting October 28th at 6 p.m. Over Zoom. The registration link is on our website. And then we'll be following that up with an in-person event the first week of November. And we're going to publish the location, time, and date on our website and also publish that out throughout our channels. And then lastly, I wanted to just highlight our encampment management, how we're doing within the city. In the last probably 6 months, there's been an increase in terms of debris, trash along Anderson as the city's main encampment. We are looking at later this week changing our cleaning and also enforcement methods and timing to try and better beautify that area as much as possible. So we're hoping that will make at least a little dent in terms of what folks are seeing out there. We're certainly aware with cleaning one time a week that shortly thereafter, it does not look the same. So we're trying to stretch our resources and refigure how to do that. And then lastly, as we've seen a lot of complaints come in around encampments on Caltrans property, staff is looking at EDMA, which is an encampment delegated maintenance agreement with Caltrans. So the city of San Francisco just executed theirs, as well as the city of Commerce. We met with staff there to try and learn more and see how it's going for their city. It's not necessarily the perfect fit at this point for us, just in terms of, but we're also just have to acknowledge the sheer breadth of land that Caltrans covers. And so when folks are calling or telling us stuff and we're like, hey, Caltrans is going to come, they come when they come, and they have, again, a large jurisdiction. And so this might be a tool that will be interesting. So as we learn more and go further down the road, I'll bring back more information around that.
What was the name of it again?
It is an encampment delegated maintenance agreement, EDMA.
Basically allows us to do the work. That we
Yeah,
wanna
so
do.
it would just
Yeah,
we
now
would
they have
contract with
single
Caltrans. And I have spoken with April from Public Works in terms of like, what's our capacity in terms of if we did take on that work, what we would do. We currently contract out for encampment cleaning, so trying to make those numbers make sense as well as something that might not happen, but it is a tool to investigate. And with that, I'll wrap up my short update. We'll have a lot of public meetings over the next 2 weeks with further updates around Marydale.
Questions?
Downtown Streets team, I heard, the organization has closed, I know that, but I have heard there's some communities that have stood up Downtown Streets team again. I wasn't sure if that was being centralized Downtown Streets team or if that they've just did their own.
No, so I'm guessing you read an article about what Modesto is doing. So they brought in another nonprofit basically to do, like, to run Downtown Streets playbook.
Got it.
So it's a whole different agency. Yeah.
Which was the follow-on question is there a replacement for the Downtown Streets team model?
In the Bay Area, no. Just to be clear, there's a lot of, so there's pieces of what Downtown Streets did in many nonprofits, but sort of the totality of their programming all in one shop does not exist. It'll be interesting to see as there's a new nonprofit every day, it seems like, if someone comes in to try and take their place, but right now there's not a one-for-one replacement.
I'm thinking not only for the case management work, which was critical, but it also helped for the beautification of downtown and keeping 4th Street clean. So I think that's a huge gap for us right now.
Yeah.
Question? So I just had a couple, appreciate that all the graphs of the data that we were both quickly writing down as you were getting it is on the webpage. It might make sense to have some national averages on there because some folks who have not worked with unhoused might not realize that a 24% have been housed is a crazy awesome number. So just to provide some context setting on that. So I'm sure the digital team can do that. I think that'd be helpful. Also Downtown Streets team, if you talked about that. And then on Anderson, appreciate that. And I'm just assuming that as the third party does a cleanup, that they're also looking at ordinance compliance, or are we doing that?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. So
It's very strict. The council policy was very strict, time, place, and manner, number of people, and I'm starting to see some more structures, which is not allowed according to our ordinance.
the team is actually out there right now.
Thank you.
Or they might have just left, but they were
Yeah,
out there this
okay.
morning. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's our team doing that piece.
Yeah, and I think as we start to have Marydale come online and we have more robust ordinance that the staff will be bringing forward to the council in the same time to ensure that our current ordinance continues to be enforced. And I know it's always capacity, but I think that would be a priority of the council, enforce our current ordinance. Okay. Awesome. We have a few minutes, so let's public comment on this item. Anyone? Yes.
Hi, my name is Gregory Andrew, and I'm a homeowner and live at 213 Las Colinas Ave in San Rafael Meadows. And I have 4 questions related to the interim project at 350 Marydale. I know it's a little hard to just remember, so I actually wrote them out and I'll.
Why don't we
Yeah,
give them to Dan? Yeah.
So the first question is, has the city completed negotiations on price and terms for 350 Marydale? Number 2 is, what commitments has the city made for the project? My third question is, when and in what forum has the city council decided on commitments or to proceed with this project? And my last question is, how was the project budget for this developed and who developed the budget?
Excellent question. So I don't know if you want to give a top line answer to those. These are all questions that we should put on the FAQ. I don't know if you've looked at our FAQ page. It is incredibly robust with lots of links, and I don't know if that information's on there. I'll turn to the Assistant City Attorney to respond.
Mayor Kate, if I just may
Please.
briefly address the process.
Please.
The city council has not finished negotiating the agreement. That will be published as part of the November 17th agenda. So at that point, everybody will be able to see what is going to the city council for final authorization and approval.
Thank you. Okay. and
That's
then-
question number 1.
So what we'll do is, you gave is your contact information on there? So,
No, but.
Okay,
I have
if you could-
more questions right there.
I understand that. So when we have public comment, we took the question in, the Assistant City Attorney answered, so staff has your remaining questions, and if you have your email on there that they can respond back. Because I think those are important that people want to share, and some,
So the assistant attorney answered question number 1.
I know, we're not going to walk through the remaining 3 right now,
You're not going to answer my 4 questions?
because I think some of them are already on there, and she just covered what has happened, what's going to be happening.
So
And
you're not gonna
if I
answer
can
my
just chime in
questions?
here, I'm John Stefanski, Assistant City Manager. So we have your questions. We need to huddle up just to determine from a legal standpoint what we can disclose at this time because the council hasn't taken an action on it. But we'll be sure to get back to you with an answer if you could provide us with your contact information.
Thank you.
Okay, so my questions are not going to be answered here in this public meeting. Thank you. I'll give you my contact information.
Just to clarify, your questions will be answered, but not always in the moment. And so we believe in the transparency of this whole conversation. So I just want to make sure that however you frame that, it's not that the city's not going to provide the information, it's that the city's going to make sure we provide accurate legal information that is consumable for the entire process and public. Anyone else have public comment on this item? Okay, not seeing anyone. Our next item is future agenda items. We know that you always come with robust agenda items, so I don't think we have any.
Great.
Okay. For the good of the order, never seen that before on an agenda in my 6 years of being mayor, 5 years. So yes to that. We always want for the good of the order. So again, appreciate all of you being here, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trying to run, I was at Oakland. That's collaborative. Trying to run into you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we were,
You're gonna just
that
stop
was so.
recording and I'll-
Oh, yeah, my bad. Interesting. And it was funny when you were giving your presentation, there was something you said that made me think about the.
But I do
Yeah,
appreciate you taking my